Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another podcast here, where we talk to industry leaders and influencers and innovators in the space of Kubernetes and cloud native. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Amazic, and I have with me today Jake Warner, who is the CEO and founder at Cycle.io. Jake, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Doing well, and thanks for having me on the podcast. Really excited to dive in.
All right, all right. Yeah, so I got connected with you a couple of years back, I think, when you just were starting Cycle, and I saw a demo of the product, and I was really blown away at just how easy it makes things. And I'm really excited to share that with the audience today as well. So as we get started, Jake, I'd like to kind of get us started with getting to know you a bit about just your background leading up to Cycle, what you've been up to, and just how you even came up with to the point of starting Cycle.
Yeah, of course. So I've been dealing with infrastructure, managing infrastructure for let's see, roughly, I don't know. Let's see, I could do the quick math. I'd say probably about 15 or 16 years now. And it all started with back when I was in high school. All my fellow classmates were getting their traditional high school jobs, and I didn't want to do that. And so I had started building websites for companies back at that time, which led into infrastructure, which led into data center automation, which led into a whole bunch of other things. And then fast forward to 2015, which was when we started building Cycle. My entire career has always been infrastructure, but with the focus on regardless of what I've been doing, it has always been, regardless of where I'm working, it has always been, how do I make this simple, right? Because I think that there's a lot of tools out there that, maybe try to do too many things, or, they maybe allow, let's just say, too much customization, things like they're just hard to manage, right? And the problem whenever you have a tool that's hard to manage is you end up in a situation that you end up just acquiring more technical debt. So everything in my life has always been, at least career-wise, has always been around infrastructure and how do I make it simple. And so that was kind of the premise that started with Cycle.
Wow, awesome. I didn't know it's been around for that long. Cycle, 2015. Wow, that's quite a while back. That's awesome.
Yeah, so we started the company in 2015, but we didn't start bringing on customers until 2018, right? Because the problem with building something like Cycle from scratch, right? Like Cycle's not built on top of Docker, it's not built on top of Kubernetes, it was built from scratch, right? So the problem with that, especially when you have a small team and you're trying to do it without VC funding, is it's going to take time, right? You can't just go out and hire 10 developers to accelerate that timeline and things like that. So it takes time. But yeah, we started building it in 2015. In 2018, we started bringing on our first customers. The product has changed significantly since then. It's gotten a lot better. The companies that are adopting Cycle are much larger, much more technical companies these days. But yeah, we've been at it for quite a while now.
Awesome. Are you still bootstrapped, or are you being funded along the way?
So the right answer is kind of right in the middle, right? So the Cycle has not brought in any VC funding, and that has been a purposeful decision to this point. But the company's funded through revenue, and then we have roughly 30 angels that are invested in our company as well. And so it's kind of neat because unlike some of these other companies out there that are, they've taken in VC funding and then they're kind of forced into this constant hamster wheel situation where they're kind of having to skimp on cut corners on certain efforts and things like that just for the sake of meeting a milestone for their next fundraise. Cycle is able to build the features that our customers are asking for and really spend a lot of time focusing on those, right? And so we've gotten into a position today where roughly 2/3 of our expenses are being paid for with revenue. And then angels have helped connect the dots, and it's nice because out of our 30 something angels, roughly 3/4 of them are either current or former founders. So it's nice because the people who have invested in the company have also built companies themselves. So it's nice whenever we have a question or we run into an issue or something, it's really easy to reach out to any of these angels and say, hey, when you were building so and so, how did you handle the situation? So it's nice just having all those operators that are involved in how we've built this, and it's a pretty unique approach compared to, I think, a lot of other companies in the industry these days.
Yeah, really cool. Wow, lots of respect for that. Because especially, looking at the headlines now, it's not just I mean, it's both the big enterprise and it's even the startups that having cash flow issues and having to lay off people. So really hats off to you for just planning it so well that you guys are able to weather even this rough economic downturn right now. That's really amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we've always focused on, we actually have some of our investors that joke that we're building the company from a bomb shelter, right? The idea is that if you build everything in a model where, instead of constantly chasing explosive growth, you change more consistent, stable growth, and you can keep focusing on that, that you can be in a position to weather storms a lot more reliably than some of these companies that are growth at all costs, right? And so that's one of the big foundations that Cycle is built on, because at the end of the day, you can either build a company that is focused on how do you grow the fastest, or how do you build a product that is something that really actually helps and benefits your customers, right? And with Cycle, the clear answer was, we're going to focus on our customers. We're going to focus on solving meaningful problems for them. And just focusing on that, is kind of helped guide a number of other decisions that have had to happen in the process. Because again, I guess to wrap it up, our customers don't care how fast we're growing, right? They care, are we going to be around? That's the only thing that matters to them. Are we going to be around tomorrow?
Yeah.
Are we going to be around a month from now or a year from now? That's the only thing that matters to them. And that's what we've put all of our focus on.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to dig into a little bit of what you're sharing about just your focus on simplicity, just simplifying complex things. I think that's quite a cool concept, much harder to practice though in reality. But I was wondering if you could take us a bit back to some of where that came from, whether it's from some of your early work experiences or life experiences, some of the examples of where you learned, you grasped this concept or got this value from that, you want to simplify complex things, and that is the uniqueness that you bring. Could you give us some of those examples of, what influenced that?
Yeah, I don't know if it was any specific thing. I think it was just, it's always easy to take something and make it more complex, right? But, making something simple is oftentimes a lot more difficult. And so part of it is just me appreciating the challenge of how do I take a complex machine and break it down to its easiest moving pieces, right? And then I think that's one part of it. The other part of it is that complexity yields much more room for things to go wrong. And with the internet and infrastructure, something's going to go wrong, right? It's just the nature of the beast. And so the whole thought here is, if I can create a system that has less moving parts, then I've created less places for things to break, right? And so I think that's been a part of it. And then the third is just within Cycle, we call it becoming superhuman. And it's the idea of, can we help developers and DevOps engineers accomplish things that they couldn't do themselves, or they can't tell you how it works, right? And it's a really exciting, and nice feeling when you have and this happens pretty often, where you have where you have developers or DevOps engineers that reach out to you and say, hey, so with Cycle, I was able to do X, whatever X is. And it's amazing, because I couldn't even tell you how, without Cycle, I couldn't tell you how to do that. I wouldn't even know where to start. And just kind of giving people that power, that, just giving them the ability to make significant changes to their infrastructure and stuff, without them having to do any of the extra heavy lifting to make that happen. It's I don't know, it's the thing that keeps us moving, I guess. It's the thing that, at the end of the day, when you have those kind of comments and messages come in, you just get excited about it.
Mm-hmm. Really cool. So I want to get into a bit about those things that you mentioned, just the complexity of managing infrastructure and stuff. So yeah, one of the things that comes to mind over the past few years is just, the rise of containers and Kubernetes, which is kind of, when Cycle itself started. That's when containers came on the scene, just a little before that. And you know and then there's Kubernetes, and Kubernetes has become really complex, and there's a lot of talk about how it's just really difficult to manage, especially when it scales. And so people are looking at ways to make it easier to manage, and really that's what Cycle talks to, that those issues. Could you shed some light on that, about just the good and the bad side of containerization as it's evolved over the past few years, the good stuff as well as the hard part about managing it?
Yeah, obviously, I'm super biased. I don't know if I have
Mhm.
much negative things to say about containerization. I think that initially, as containerization was being adopted, there was some bad practices that were kind of that kind of got adopted. But I think over time, a lot of those bad practices have kind of just been kind of phased out, as people have continued to get more familiar with the technology and the way of doing things. So I don't know if there's necessarily any negative things about containerization in today's world. The pros are what I'm a lot more excited about. Just how much easier it is to ship infrastructure, or sorry, ship applications and things. But yeah, the orchestration side around containerization is the part that I think a lot of people are still overcomplicating, right? And
Right.
again, thus the entire premise of Cycle. I think that there's a lot of companies and organizations out there that have been sold on, hey, you need this really complex, really customizable orchestration platform, that does A, B, and C. Oh, and by the way, YouTube is running on top of it and all these other things, right? But at the end of the day, most of these companies don't need that, right? And that's where we're having success, right? We're getting in front of these big companies and we're saying, hey, so like you bought into Kubernetes, you spent millions of dollars adopting it and setting it up and configuring it and things like that. But has it actually really helped your company? Like let's be real. Has it helped you deliver products faster? Has it helped you reduce the amount of time you're spending maintaining things? Is it reducing downtime? Like, is it allowing you to become more efficient? And more of these companies now are saying, no, it hasn't. And then that's been a big shift in the market. 2 years ago when we were in conversations with companies, and if they would hear that we were not, if they learned throughout that conversation that we were not built on top of Kubernetes, that was a disqualifier for Cycle, right? The deal would end immediately. The conversation would end immediately, and there'd be no deal that came out of it. But fast forward to today, it's like that window has finally opened for us. Now we're having companies that are saying, yeah, we bought Kubernetes. It hasn't solved the problems that we needed to solve, et cetera, and we're looking for an alternative. And that's the spot where things are getting really exciting for Cycle, because it's that window is finally opened to where we can actually our story is resonating with a lot more people, with far more people than it used to. I guess when you're describing it that way.
That's really cool to know. Interesting to see how things have changed as well, just so quickly, just in over 2 years. And infrastructure keeps getting more complex. There's the different types of infrastructures, that people manage in the cloud. And one of the things that I took a look on your website, the first thing it says is that infrastructure needs to be standardized. Could you talk to a bit about that as a pain point? What's the pain point when it comes to infrastructure? How is it not standardized? How can it be standardized?
Yeah, so there's anyone in this industry knows that setting up and installing software, there's so many different variables that come into that, right? Because like, even if you suppose you're at AWS and you say, I want to use Ubuntu version whatever, right? I don't know what the latest version of Ubuntu is these days, but I want to use the latest version of Ubuntu. And then you go over to let's say Google Cloud, and you say, hey, I want to use the latest version of Ubuntu as well, right? So even though you've made the same decision in both places, you don't know if it's the exact same image or the exact same kernel. And getting to that point where you have the exact same everything is, a whole effort in itself. And then once you throw Kubernetes or whatever container orchestration platform you're using on top of that, you just end up where you have all this just different variables across the board. And yeah, you have tools like Terraform and Chef and Pup and things like that to try to standardize a lot of those things. But the problem with a lot of those tools is you're taking variations and trying to standardize them later, right? Where with containers, you're able to say, hey, at build time, I'm standardizing this. And so Cycle aims to do the same thing with the infrastructure layer as well. It's why all servers running Cycle run Cycle OS that is almost a container in itself, right? Like it doesn't ever get installed to disk, it runs in RAM. But that way, it's really easy for our customers to say, hey, if you're running at AWS or GCP or a server sitting in your closet, the Cycle is going to treat everything the exact same way, because that VM that you just deployed over into AWS is going to be running the exact same kernel as the server that is sitting in your closet, right? And that's one of the big things that we're hearing about companies looking into Cycle is, these companies are saying like, there's obviously lots of problems around container orchestration, but there's also fundamental problems of infrastructure management that we haven't solved yet, right? Or either that they're plaguing, or that they're slowing us down. One of the companies in our pipeline right now is a company that has 3 data centers that they're looking to adopt a Cycle. They have 3 different data centers that they're looking to adopt Cycle to manage, and the biggest problem they have is not containers. Like they're like, hey, yeah, the fact that Cycle is a container orchestration platform, neat. Like, yes, we use containers in our company, but the reason they're looking at Cycle is the infrastructure management component of it, right? To standardize that underlying infrastructure. And so it's neat to be able to provide that single platform that allows most of these companies to go from, hey, I have infrastructure, going through the entire infrastructure management layer, including IP management, network management, all those different things, up into container orchestration. So that way, from your raw infrastructure all the way up to your application that's been containerized, you have a very standardized approach. And so it's neat to be have built a platform that is more than just container orchestration.
Mhm. Yeah, and I really want to get into quickly just what Cycle is and, get into all of the things that it does. Just before that, I want to ask about this phrase I just saw on your website, which is low ops. So heard of low code, heard of DevOps. Low ops is new. So who coined the term? What does it mean? Could you kind of break it down for us?
Yeah, so we were in a meeting with a company a few months ago, and they'd just seen a demo of Cycle, and they very similar to the comment that you just made of, hey, I've heard of low code. Cycle's not a low code platform, but they're like, it is kind of like a low ops platform. Like it's taking DevOps and it's still allowing the same capabilities of a traditional DevOps platform, but it's simplifying them. And so like I was thinking about it, and it's like, you know what? That actually sounds kind of nice. Like, because it is a way of positioning a Cycle, within the market, right? Like you could, yes, you could still do really technical DevOps things, but our goal is to make them simpler for you, right? And so the low ops approach, the low ops story around that of just simplified DevOps, I think it's a story that it's a story that resonates with our users, but I think will continue to resonate with more of the market as more companies hear about who we are.
Really cool, really neat. I want to pick your brains a bit more on the positioning part that you just mentioned. So this is one change that you made. Positioning Cycle as a low ops platform. Could you talk to us about kind of the evolution of Cycle's positioning and the things you've learned along the way?
Yeah, so when we started Cycle back in 2015, and then launched in 2018, we were a containers as a service platform, right? So we owned all the infrastructure and we just sold to individual developers building side projects, right? Very similar to, I guess, like kind of like how Heroku kind of got started, right? But as time went on, we started realizing that that larger companies saw much more of a benefit from Cycle than individual developers. But that's not the same. Individual developers can't get a benefit from Cycle. It's just much more meaningful towards companies, right? So we pivoted to selling mainly the startups initially, and then over the years that's just continued to get into larger and larger deals. to where, now we're interacting with larger companies. And so that's been the biggest focus. It's kind of a bottom-up sales strategy with developers, to now it's more of a top-down sales strategy with larger companies. And I wouldn't say that it's like a full-on enterprise play, right? Because there's a lot of small, medium, and sorry, there's a lot of small businesses, medium businesses, and then startups that are still benefiting from Cycle. So it's not necessarily a full-on enterprise play, but the fact that the realization that larger companies also had that benefit from Cycle that startups were seeing was really meaningful to us.
All right, very cool. Wow. So tell us about Cycle. So what is Cycle? So you said Cycle is a container orchestration platform. You're positioning it as a low ops platform, but kind of get into a little bit more detail about what it actually does.
So Cycle is a low ops platform for infrastructure management and container orchestration, right? So there's kind of the two sides of that, and the new site that we launched recently dives into both of those different sides. But in a nutshell, the whole goal is companies come to Cycle, they bring their own infrastructure. Cycle connects to their infrastructure, manages all the container orchestration on it, and just makes the entire process very simple compared to most of the other products. One of the biggest benefits of Cycle, though, is we take a SaaS approach to everything. And what this means is, even though it's your infrastructure, we are automatically pushing updates to it automatically, right? So where the average version of Kubernetes today is roughly 17 months out of date, there's not a single server connected to the Cycle that's more than 2 weeks out of date right now. And that's because we usually push updates every 2 to 3 weeks. And so it's nice because all of our customers, they own their infrastructure, they own their data, they own their networks, but they're constantly getting those updates that will make their, the underlying infrastructure more secure. They'll be getting new features and things like that. So we kind of look at it as the best of both worlds mentality. And it allows companies to spend more time writing code and building stuff and less time maintaining infrastructure and orchestration software and all these other kind of mundane things that have to happen as part of that DevOps process.
Cool. So infrastructure management. So the next thing that comes to my mind is just what kinds of infrastructure does it manage, and is there any kind of infrastructure that it doesn't manage?
Yeah, so you can run Cycle with virtual machines, you can run Cycle with bare metal, you can run Cycle with both. You can mix, you can do a hybrid setup where you're using a little bit of both. The only thing that Cycle does not support today is ARM. You can't run Cycle on any ARM architecture yet. We haven't had much of a request from customers for that yet. I'm guessing at some point we'll add that functionality, but today that is not that is not supported. That being said, back in November, we launched our infrastructure abstraction layer, which allows companies to run Cycle on their own infrastructure, regardless of where that is. Previously, we only supported a couple clouds, and today we still have a couple native integrations with clouds, but the infrastructure abstraction layer allows you to run that infrastructure anywhere you want, right? So like we have a couple companies that are running Cycle inside their data centers right now, and the infrastructure abstraction layer is one of the components that is making that happen.
All right, so you can have a mix. You can have like instances in your data center. You can have instances in AWS, EC2, let's say, or even containers, ECS, Fargate stuff. Fargate, Lambda, do those things as well work? I mean, does Cycle connect with serverless infrastructure or services as well?
No, so Cycle's whole premise is that it just wants commodity infrastructure, right? So it just wants raw compute. So in this case, if you connect with AWS, we're just going to run on top of EC2. If you connect with GCP, we're just going to run virtual machines, right? But that doesn't mean you can't run Cycle alongside those other applications. We have a number of companies that are running Cycle inside of their AWS VPC, where Cycle's managing all the containers and EC2 instances and things like that. And then these companies might be using like Aurora database or things like that, running right alongside Cycle. So we have a number of companies that are using AWS services outside of Cycle.
All right. And for containers, where do the containers run?
The containers will run on those EC2 instances.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. And and give us a bit about how Cycle just manages all of these varieties of instances. Because it's quite a task. Even the cloud providers have individual services for different types of instances. And so, having one management layer for different types of instances seems like it would be a really complex thing. How does it happen? What happens under the hood?
So the question you're asking is, with like, if you want to use EC2, how there's many different types of EC2 instances?
Yeah, so like VMs, in the data center, containers in the cloud, just so many different nuances to them, and containers tend to be a lot more ephemeral, especially, if it's like short time span workloads or different kinds of workloads, especially, how does Cycle really manage all of the different variation with different instance types, different workload types? What's really going on under the hood? How does Cycle really manage such variety?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, so much of it comes back down to the standardization that we just talked about, right? Like if when Cycle starts on a server, its whole premise is by the time Cycle OS is fully up and running, my goal is that this server, you would not have any idea that this server is different from the one sitting next to it, right? Even if it's a different type. Cycles puts a lot of effort into standardizing, right? And then once you have that kind of standardized base, then it's really easy to implement workloads on top of it, regardless of what those workloads are doing, right? Like obviously, if a workload requires a GPU, because Cycle supports GPUs just natively, if you have a container that needs a GPU, obviously Cycle is going to figure out what servers you have that have GPUs and allow you to choose from those for where those containers will live. But so much of it just comes down to the standardization, right? If you can standardize everything from the first second everything turns on, it makes a lot of other problems a lot less complex. And I think very similar to how this whole conversation started, early on when we were talking about like what's the benefit of standardization, and why did I take this approach of simplicity? So much of that came down to just, I guess, like I had already mentioned, you can't fix a broken machine by just adding more pieces to it, right? Sometimes you have to build a brand new machine. And so that's what we did with Cycle. Just by building that brand new machine, problems that other products are kind of having to fight through and deal with are much less significant problems to us because we kind of went back and solved those fundamental issues early on.
Neat, neat. When we talk about like cloud instances, especially, there are a lot of costs associated with the different instance types, for example. And there's, FinOps is like a whole new concept of, how do you reduce cloud costs without compromising performance. On that front, does Cycle optimize for cost as well? Can you choose instance types to kind of reduce costs? Anything on that front? Because especially during these times, I think a lot of people are thinking about that.
Yeah, so Cycle does not make any decisions about what infrastructure it deploys. That is
Okay.
entirely up to our users, right? So our user can say, hey, I want 5 M5 extra larges. I want 3, T3 mediums or whatever, right? Users get to decide entirely what infrastructure they want, how many of them they want, and things like that. Cycle's job is just kind of behind the scenes to standardize and get it online, provisioned, configured, secured, etc. Right? So because that's one of the things you can't really standardize. Although I know some of companies are trying to do that, but when every company is different, you have to still at least allow some customizability. So no, we don't just do kind of blanket, default we don't default to a specific server type, right? We let the companies that are using Cycle make those decisions.
Okay. Okay. So I was wondering if you could show us a quick demo of Cycle in action. I saw this a while back and was quite impressed with just how fast it was.
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah, it'd be great to see.
Excellent. So this is Cycle's dashboard. I guess before we dive in, I want to let you know that we have a new portal. Sorry, let me take a step back. This is a portal that has been live since 2018. This was the original portal that we built with Cycle. It's obviously, we've continued to add to it, but the overall UI has not changed significantly since 2018. But we have a new portal that's been in development for about 6 months now, that we're expecting to launch within the next month and a half ish. That will significantly modernize how our UI looks. So I'm really excited for that. But for the sake of the demo today, we'll still use the existing portal that is live today. As we dive in, Very quickly, this is a development account that we have up and running. You can see that there's 4 servers connected to this account. We have 2 servers running over at Vultr, 1 running over at AWS, and 1 running over at GCP. So right off the bat, very clear that Cycle can run infrastructure at different providers at the exact same time. You can see all these servers are checking in; they're healthy. As I alluded to earlier, how Cycle makes sure that the servers are, sorry, all these servers automatically get all of these servers automatically get updates from Cycle. This is that version number. So in this case, this is a build that was deployed about, let's see, 9 days ago. And so with this, if we want to click on any of these servers, we can, we can see just general metrics about any of these servers. So we can see, load averages, RAM usage, storage usage, what type of CPU is in the server, uptime, just any of this general information. But where most of the heavy lifting is, or occurs rather, happens within environments. So environments are where the actual containers and applications live. And so these environments can span any of the servers within a cluster. So in this case, you can see that all of these 3 environments are spread across the production cluster. And if I go back to infrastructure, we can see that the production cluster here has 3 servers, 1 at GCP, 1 at AWS, and 1 at Vultr. So that means that when I'm deploying these environments and deploying containers into these environments, they can live at any of those 3 providers, or maybe some at the same time, right? So if I go into this production environment here, and I go into containers, we can see that, for example, we have this website container that is running. And again, this is just a test environment, but if I open that website container and go to instances, so we can see our 5 instances. In this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 of them running at GCP and 1 of them running over at Vultr. Now, in this case, this was likely a test where someone was just scaling up and scaling down. If we wanted to scale up even more, we could say, hey, let's have 7 of them. And again, obviously, we're doing a manual scaling event right now just to show this. But you can see that Cycle decided, hey, we're going to drop these new instances, 1 over on AWS and 1 over on Vultr. And so if I want to, like, let's say, because we still have a number of these over that are running over at GCP, suppose I want to take, this instance over here and I want to move it over to, let's say, AWS. So I can go up, click migrate instance. I can move this over to AWS, move instance. And in a second, we'll see that AWS instance come online. We'll see that it's gone into a migrating status. And then this server will come online this container will come online momentarily. There we go. There's one. And then the other one should be coming online in just a second. I'm going to refresh because one of the issues with our old portal is that sometimes states are not aligned, but that'll come online in a second. But at the very least, we do have the other AWS instance that had started. So we can connect to the console. We can see what's happening in here. If we want to SSH into any of these containers, we can do that as well. So like if we jump into this first container that's running over at GCP, if we wanted to SSH into it, we can come up here, request SSH access, copy these credentials, paste these credentials in. And then we are now inside that container. And so it's actually really cool what's happening behind the scenes is if you notice this this prompt that we used to log in, we didn't specify a Cycle server. We didn't specify what server this was on. Cycle automatically figured that out depending on the instance ID, and so it just makes it really easy to if this instance was moved to a different server, if this instance was moved to a different server, it's very easy to still SSH into it, and you don't have to go and figure out what server it's running on, log into that server, run like a Docker execute or something, just to figure out what things are running. And then the other thing that you'll notice is that we didn't copy any SSH keys. With Cycle, makes it really easy to get connected to the resources you need to because you have these point-in-time tokens. And this token only exists in this case. You can see it'll expire in roughly 29 minutes. If we wanted to expire it right now, it's as easy as doing that. And now it has been expired. And so then even though we're still connected to it, even though we are still connected to it right now, no one could use that token again. So it just makes it really easy to log in and interact with the containers you need to. but still being able to, from a high level, see what's happening within these containers.
Mhm. Yeah. And when it comes to scaling, how does it work? Like, are there policies? Can you set policies saying scale in a certain way? With, can you set any of that, or is a lot of that just automated and abstracted for you?
Yeah, so you can do that when you're creating a container. So if we go ahead and click deploy container, give it a name. Let's just say this is a test. You can choose whether the container is stateless or stateful. Whoops, sorry, I clicked the wrong button. We'll go back. So we'll give it a name. You can choose whether it's stateless or stateful. And then you have this deployment strategy. And so this is where you can say, hey, I want Cycle to just decide, use the default, or you can say, I want Cycle to deploy to the servers that are first available. I want to focus on high availability. I want to manually deploy, pick where my instances are going to run. I want to use this node deployment strategy. The node deployment strategy will put one instance per server, and just automatically. So that way, if you scale up more infrastructure, all of those new servers will automatically get an instance of this container, assuming other criteria are met. Or I can focus on resource density, which is like, hey, if I have 5 servers, I want all of the resource users to be climbing at the same time. And then one of the newest ones that we introduced was called Edge, where if you upload a container and you say, I want to run 20 copies of this, it's like we'll try to run it at the edge as much as you can, right? So if you are connected to GCP and AWS and Vultr, and let's say you have 30 servers up and running, by selecting Edge, Cycle is going to figure out how to deploy those to the maximum number of geographic locations as possible. So that way you've almost built your own edge network just with one option.
Oh, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
And so once we choose an option there, you can, again, choose how many. If you want to restrict it, so you could say like, hey, Cycle's only going to run on, servers that have a tag of Rails, right? I can do that. And then here's, you're choosing your image. So if I choose recent images, these are images that have been just recently uploaded to Cycle, to this specific Cycle account. So I can choose any of those, and then actually let's go ahead and choose one. Let's see if I have my getting started image. I can choose whether that container needs to be publicly accessible. If I click enabled, Cycle will automatically configure the load balancer for me. So it's not like after I do this, I have to go, modify something else. Cycle just makes this entire process very smooth. And then by adding 443:80, we're telling Cycle that we also want to allow HTTPS traffic and route it to port 80 behind the scenes. So that way the load balancer is going to be configured for TLS termination. And then also something I should mention is that behind the scenes, Cycle is building IPsec networks to connect everything. So that way all encryption between any Cycle server, even if they're different providers, is fully encrypted. And Cycle's automatically taking care of all that too. So if I go ahead and we're going to deploy 2 of these instances, there we go. And the deployment strategy that I left was just the default strategy. So yeah, in this case, Cycle put both of them on that same AWS server, which is fine. Obviously, the deployment strategy is much more impactful in terms of where those containers will live.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really cool. Yeah.
Excellent.
Great.
Yep.
In terms of integration, like right now there's a lot of focus on kind of integrating different open source products for different purposes. When it comes to Cycle, how much of the things that you need to do, in terms of the design decisions you made, how much of it have you packed into Cycle versus how much of it have you left open for you to integrate with another tool that may do that job better? Could you kind of give us some perspective on that? What's in Cycle and what you could integrate with Cycle?
Yeah, so Cycle is built to be a kind of a batteries included platform, right?
Yeah.
One of the big differences between Cycle and many of these other offerings is that you should not need anything outside of Cycle to get up and running. But we know that that's not always going to be the case, and that some people are going to want to use very specific tools for certain things, right? And so there's a number of API endpoints that we've opened. There's a number of configuration variables that you can change, webhooks that you can modify, sockets that you can connect to allow you to, take the building blocks that Cycle provides and extend them into the ways that a specific company might need, right? Because like our goal is to, introduce simplicity, but without compromising on capabilities, right? And so part of that not compromising on capabilities is allowing users to open the doors that they may need, if they're if they want to use a specific technology that Cycle, or sorry, a specific technology outside of Cycle.
All right, cool. Yeah, it's really neat. Yeah, thanks. This was really good to see. And I'm always amazed at how it can connect to different cloud platforms and even move instances across cloud platforms just so easily. I think that's really amazing. Just really simplifies things. So that's awesome. Great job with just designing all of this.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of really neat things Cycle does. Obviously, this is just, this is kind of just the very high level overview of it. But from networking to pipelines to image storage to DNS, to automatic TLS termination and certificates and things like that. Like there's a whole slew of the things that the platform does. But if we were to dive into all of those things, we'd be on this call for a long time.
Take a long time, but yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, thanks a lot for that demo. So winding down, I want to ask about just the use cases that Cycle is meant for. I saw on your website that you have a couple of different use cases that you call out. One of them being SaaS and PaaS, and one of them being even gaming. Could you tell us about some of those use cases?
Yeah, so the thing that we found that Cycle really, really fits into, so as you mentioned, there's venture studios, there's SaaS, PaaS, and then there's gaming. And so gaming is the newest one to us. We've recently started having some really good conversation with gaming companies, and we kind of just stumbled into this kind of situation. We're like, wow, we do provide a lot of value for gaming companies that, maybe they need low latency, maybe they need to operate at the edge, maybe they need to be able to scale up and down very quickly. Maybe they need to have higher density of infrastructure. Maybe they need to be able to push out updates quickly and have their infrastructure automatically adjust to that and things like that. So there's a lot of things that we've done with the benefits that we help with, use cases around gaming that we help simplify. But the other two, venture studios, is something that we've been working on for many, many years. And venture studios, it's yes, a lot of the same benefits as gaming, but the big kind of component for venture studios is if I'm a company that's building products for other companies, and each of these companies has their own set of infrastructure, their own set of tools, how can I, the venture studio, make it super easy for my team to jump between project A, project B, project C, without my team having to learn all these new technologies constantly, right? And that's where Cycle's been hugely beneficial to these venture studios. Is it's one tool that allows them to still provide flexibility to their customers, but all of their engineers have to only learn to work one way. And then because of that entire kind of standardization of processes, even, you end up in a position where you can have a developer that's working on project A move over to project B, and even if they've never seen project B before, just because of Cycle, they can already just instinctivly see how everything is built and how it's structured. So it's really nice just being able to have these companies that are moving really quickly, because their developers can just move from project to project and not have to reinvent the wheel. And then finally, the third vertical that you had mentioned was PaaS and SaaS. And yeah, it's something that, one of the things that brings me the most joy is the fact that we have platforms that are building. Sorry, Cycle has platforms being Cycle has platforms being built on top of it. So it's really neat to be a platform and have other platforms built on top of you. It shows that you've built something of substance, right?
Any examples that you could share at all?
Yeah, so one of our companies is one of our customers has built a platform that is like a workload processing service for that has like it's a workload processing service that has an AI component to it, right? So if you think about like Lambda, right? Think about like a very fast performant Lambda, that has access to GPUs and things like that. They've built that entire platform on top of Cycle. So it's really neat to see that their customers are, technically using Cycle behind the scenes and they don't even know it. So it just shows that companies can build, some really powerful offerings on top of Cycle.
Really cool. What kind of companies do you, or when do you see companies that come to you, that they're ready for something like Cycle? Mostly, do you find that these are companies that have tried and struggled with Kubernetes, or are these companies that uh, have hardly just gotten started and are they don't want to go through the whole process? Where are they at in their journey in the cloud?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's some of both, right? Like we have a lot of companies that are coming to Cycle with greenfield projects where they're saying, hey, we might be using Kubernetes for this other project within our company, but it's been such a headache that we want to try Cycle for this other project, right? So sometimes it's that where it's hey, they've tried it, they've tried Kubernetes, but they want to try Cycle for something else. Other times it's companies saying, hey, how can we move away from Kubernetes to Cycle? And then we also have companies that are coming to Cycle saying, hey, we're building a brand new product. We haven't ever used Kubernetes, but we've read enough about it that we think it's just overly complex for what we need. And so that's where again, some of all of the above is the right answer to that.
Yeah. How does pricing work?
So I was going to share my screen again, but then I forgot that we had already turned it off. But with pricing.
All right, so the pricing page.
Yeah, so this is our pricing page. And you can see we have a couple different tiers here. We have our free tier, light tier, business tier, and enterprise. The biggest metric that Cycle's pricing is based off of is how many users are you going to have within your account, and how many servers are you going to have deployed, right? And with the light tier, you can deploy more than 3. It's just we have a cost per each seat over those 3. The bigger thing is that as as your company grows, moving into the business tier and then eventually into the enterprise tier is volume discounts, right? So if a company has 1,200 engineers, the business tier is not the most cost effective for them. In that case, it's better off for them going to the enterprise tier, where we can do custom contracts and things like that. But very high level, the main metrics for our pricing is how many users and how many servers. Because you own the servers, you can drop as many containers on them as you want. It doesn't matter, right? It's your infrastructure. And so we don't charge for storage. We don't charge for number of containers. We don't charge for a number of environments or networks or anything like that. It's all how many servers and how many users.
Yeah. Cool. Last question for you, Jake, is just could you share some of the early results that your customers see once they start using Cycle? Because it's quite a switch. And what are some of the differences and the benefits that your customers see?
I mean, so different customers are coming to Cycle for different problems, is what we've learned, right? Some companies are looking at Cycle as kind of I alluded to earlier, mainly for the infrastructure management component of it, right? And then we have others that are like, hey, I'm building applications. The container orchestration side of this is really, really important to me. But the biggest thing that we see is kind of just a general kind of overall benefit of using Cycle is just the fact that it allows companies to spend more time focusing on the things that are really important to them. In this case, or in many cases, it's writing code, right? There are too many solutions out there today where developers end up spending more time almost maintaining than actually building. And I mean, and it's so unfortunate because you have people who, the reason they became a developer is because they have that really big passion to just build. And then when they're stuck spending half their time or a quarter of their time just maintaining an existing deployment is just not a good use of their time. And then even DevOps engineers, right? There's DevOps engineers that come to Cycle, and for a long time they've had to be deeply involved in some of these mundane processes that are just a bad use of their time. And so with Cycle, it can allow them to get some of that time back to spend more time figuring out how to automate even further and get more efficient with business objectives and things like that, as opposed to is my Kubernetes cluster up to date, or is everything running, is something offline, and things like that. Like there's just all these kind of distractions that appear, and so Cycle is really, really good at limiting distractions, I guess is maybe the easiest way of putting it.
All right, really neat. Yeah, thanks for that. Just an overview and even getting into the details of just how Cycle works and the things that you can do with Cycle. I think it was really a great conversation. So for our viewers, if you like to check out more about Cycle, definitely head to their website, cycle.io, and check it out. I think there's definitely a bit of nostalgia to this product. It's kind of like going back to the days when, things were simpler. Kind of like the Heroku days, if some of you remember running a simple app on Heroku and kind of the simplicity of that. There's a bit of nostalgia about Cycle that comes to my mind. So a really cool product, and thanks, Jake, for just giving us a really really good overview about it as well.
Yeah,
Jake, before you go,
I was
yeah,
just gonna
just
say thanks for having me on the podcast. It's been a great time.
yeah, sure. Before you go, there are a couple of questions to get to know you a bit. Uh, want to ask your alternate career path, if not for your job in tech.
If I didn't have a career in tech, I think I would be a meteorologist, or either a meteorologist or a lawyer. Both of those have always been something that have been really interesting to me.
Okay. Yeah. Um, could you talk about a product or tool that you think is very elegantly built?
Ooh, a tool that is built really elegantly. Um, hmm. I've not put much thought into that. I mean, it's gonna sound nerdy, and I know it's kind of trendy right now. I won't say Chat GPT, but I will say OpenAI's approach to their plugin model. It is a very neat, flexible model that kind of similar to like how we built Cycle's IEL. It makes it really easy to piece, to kind of piece other plugins together. In a way that is actually very, very simple. So we'll go with that answer for now.
Mhm. Yeah, I should check out. I've been hearing about the plugins. I haven't checked them out myself. Yeah, really cool. Um, could you share one lesson that you've learned as a CEO, founder, something that you applied, maybe something from the past year, or any lesson that you learned and applied?
Uh yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest thing is, if you spend any time on LinkedIn, you always hear all these like, oh, 10 steps to success, there's everyone's always trying to come up with easy ways to like solve problems, but the deep fundamental problems you can't just solve with a quick how-to guide, right? And I worry that we're moving into a position where we don't have enough actual architects solving deep problems, and everyone's just trying to figure out how to build the next, product to get a vanity metric across the finish line, right? And I guess so. The lesson here is just there's hard problems don't always have an easy answer, but you have to be up for the challenge for it, and so that's something that I pride myself on.
Mhm. Yeah, it kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier at the start, just simplifying complex things. Really neat. The next question, so you obviously wear multiple hats in your role as founder, CEO, developer, product guy, business leader, marketer, teacher, perhaps, trainer. And so which of these roles really resonates with you?
Oh, at the end of the day, being a developer is very core to who I am. And even though most of the day is spent managing, whether it's marketing stuff, sales stuff, development stuff, project management, legal, HR, any of those things, there's always something at the end of the day of being able to get back in the code that I really deeply enjoy. And so I'd probably have to say the developer component of it. I'm a builder at heart.
All right, all right. Yeah, good to know. Your last question, Jake. What's your favorite source for finding out what's new and happening in tech?
It would be a toss up between either Reddit or LinkedIn. Those are where I spend most of my time. I like kind of the aggregation data where you kind of once you've the interest things will kind of bubble to the top, and then you can kind of dive deeper from there. So that's usually where it starts, and then I'll end up on 5 links deep into, some weird article about, how something works. But most of the time it starts on LinkedIn or Reddit.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for joining us, Jake. I think it'll be great to have you back once your new UI is launched, and even to get into some more of those features that we couldn't talk about today, things like pipelines and the other things that Cycle does. It'll be great to have you back after a couple of months or so.
Sounds good.
So yeah, thanks again for joining us. And everyone, if you're really excited about what you heard, go and check out cycle.io and join us again for our next episode. Thank you all. That's it for now. Signing off. Bye-bye.
Thank you.